The 1929 bubble, and the long global depression that followed, is one of the most dramatic calamities in financial history. The human pain that followed set records yet to be broken. Unemployment in many countries surpassed a shocking 25%. Why and how did a financial bubble morph into a full-blown economic depression? How can you, dear viewer, know whether the next financial crisis could morph into a depression? How to defend yourself? Let's dig into the 1929 calamity. Gary Richardson and co-authors explain that the roaring 1920s were a decade of widespread optimism. Families prospered in the U.S. as new technologies proliferated, enabled by mass production. The 1920s saw the rise of automobiles, telephones, the radio, and also aviation. Financial prosperity also spread. Individual investors went into stocks and bonds. A new industry of brokerage houses and investment trusts extended margin accounts to ordinary people who bought stocks with borrowed funds. Leverage was very high. Individuals typically deposited only 10% to buy stock and borrowed the rest. As borrowed money poured into equity markets, stock prices soared. The Dow Jones Industrial Average increased a shocking six-fold from 1921 to 1929. After prices peaked, famed economist Irving Fisher proclaimed one of financial history's most infamous words:
"Stock prices have reached what looks like a permanently high plateau."
Maury Klein explains that, unlike most market disasters, the 1929 crash was not the event of one single day, but a series of events stretched initially across a week. On Black Monday, October 28, the Dow declined 13%. The following day, Black Tuesday, the market dropped another 12%. By mid-November, the Dow had lost almost half of its value. But this sharp first leg down was not enough to curb the enthusiasm of some observers. One of the proponents of the New Era argument in the 1920s was Irving Fisher. Did you know that famed economist Irving Fisher was also a successful technology entrepreneur? William Barber and co-authors explain that Fisher had been the founder of a startup that was sold in 1925 to Remington Rand, one of the hot technology stocks of the 1920s. Maury Klein points out that Irving Fisher then doubled down on his permanently high plateau argument with an entire book, published in 1930. In his book, Irving explained why he still saw stock prices as low. Fundamentals were sound. Industrial R&D was at an all-time high. Inventions, patents, and new management methods would increase profits, justifying 1929 stock prices. It was a new era according to Fisher. He also put his money where his mouth was. Fisher was heavily invested in stocks on margin. He did receive margin calls, but never sold stock. Rather, he borrowed from his sister-in-law Caroline. Some of you, dear viewers, probably recall that this new era argument has been seen before. Back in Britain, 1845, the novel technology of railroads promised a new era of productivity in business and untold profits for investors. You know the end of that story. And the same happened again in 1929, as we'll see next. The stock market staged an impressive recovery from Black Tuesday 1929 to April 1930. The second leg of the worst bear market the U.S. had ever seen was just around the corner. Gary Richardson explains that the stock market crash frightened investors and consumers. Men and women lost their life savings, feared for their jobs, and worried whether they could pay their bills. Fear and uncertainty reduced purchases of big-ticket items that people bought with credit, like automobiles. Firms like Ford saw demand decline, so they slowed production and laid off workers. Unemployment rose, and the contraction that had begun in the summer of 1929 deepened. Then, problems in another portion of the financial system, commercial banks, turned what may have been a short, sharp recession into the longest, deepest depression. Maury Klein explains that studies into the relation between the 1929 financial crash and the 1930s depression have not produced consensus. But several potential causes have been studied. Policy errors are a prime suspect. First, the Fed refused to expand credit aggressively from 1930 to 1932, and rather chose to view bank failures as cleansing. Second, the Hoover administration cut spending and raised taxes to balance the budget, worsening the downturn. Third, the trade protectionism following the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 triggered retaliatory tariffs and choked world trade. Barry Eichengreen and Peter Tamine study another aspect of the Depression: the international gold standard, which transmitted the U.S. deflation worldwide. Countries tied to gold couldn't expand their money supply without losing reserves. Only countries that abandoned gold recovered sooner, such as the UK in 1931. Friedman and Schwartz described the resulting 1930s commercial banking crisis as follows. From 1930 to 1933, the U.S. experienced 4 waves of bank failures. Depositors pulled out their savings, shrinking the money supply. Remember, this was before deposit insurance was invented. Thousands of banks failed, wiping out credit to businesses and consumers. The Fed failed to act as a lender of last resort. In the US, the second leg of the stock market crash dragged on for years, when the Dow closed at its lowest value of the 20th century, at a staggering 89% below its peak. The economic devastation caused by the 1930s depression is sadly well known. By 1933, unemployment in the US was 25%. Around the world, unemployment soared too. In Germany, unemployment topped 30% and played a major role in the rise of the Nazi Party, according to historian Ian Kershaw. How about Irving Fisher, who had helped promote the New Era story? He rode the stock market all the way down, refusing to sell. In 1932, Fisher finally blew up and was forced to liquidate everything. His fortune, equivalent to $190 million in 2025, was gone. Personal bankruptcy only was averted by borrowing twice from his wealthy sister-in-law, Caroline. Fisher also arranged that his employer, Yale University, buy his home, which was in danger of foreclosure. In a book later written by Fisher's son, he explains that Caroline's collateral, which had been put up to secure Fisher's margin account, was gone too. This left Fisher indebted to Caroline to the tune of $33 million in today's money. Fisher still lived in his former home, which now belonged to Yale. Fisher then failed to pay rent. His end is tragic. He stiffed both his employer and his sister-in-law, never repaying his debts. The turning point in the U.S. started with Roosevelt's New Deal in 1933. The gold standard was abandoned, and a banking reform stabilized expectations. The economy began a slow recovery, but full employment was not restored until World War II. And the stock market, which peaked in 1929, would not see another high until 1954. Our verified sources are shown here. Write to us in the comments section if your interpretation is different, or if you'd like to suggest other sources. What are the takeaways for you? Today's takeaway is simple: financial history rhymes. We saw the New Era story first in 1845 with railroads, and then in 1929 with mass production, the automobile, and radio. It happened again in the late 1990s, with the dot-com bubble. Once again, salespeople claimed we were in a new era of prosperity, courtesy of a new technology that promises to change the world. In all 3 cases, stock prices ended where they started, at rock bottom. How about today's AI mania? Could we see a similar end to this new era story too? By 1845, rail stocks doubled in 3 years. By 1929, stocks went up 6-fold in 8 years. By 1999, technology stocks went up 3-fold in 5 years. How about AI today? If we take the public release of ChatGPT in late 2022 as the start of the AI boom, then we must see that stocks have more than doubled by late 2025, in a move similar to the rail mania of 1845. Does this mean that today's AI mania is just getting started? Only time will tell. Regardless, avoid so-called expert market advice like the plague. Financial history is littered with fools that attempted to predict stocks, only to lose their money, and their followers' money. One final takeaway: could the next financial crash turn into a depression? Reconsider the 4 potential culprits for the 1930s depression, and come to your own conclusions. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to see more financial history from verified sources, subscribe to our channel and join our community of individual investors who strive to learn from the misfortunes of others to avoid similar fates.